Right now, you're probably killing time. Maybe you're waiting for something, maybe you're just scrolling, maybe this video is the thing you picked to fill a gap between two other things, and you didn't think about that decision for more than a second. But that impulse, the one that made you reach for something to do, is one of the oldest impulses a human being has. The question is, what did it look like before screens, before books, before any of the things we built to feed it? Because here's what most people assume. That prehistoric life was so consumed by survival, hunting, gathering, avoiding predators, finding shelter, that there was no time left over for anything else. That leisure is a modern invention, something that showed up after civilization and made things easy enough. Except the evidence says something completely different. And when you see what prehistoric humans were actually doing with their time, it changes how you think about creativity, boredom, and what it actually means to be human. Let's start with the numbers. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose lifestyle most closely mirrors how prehistoric humans lived, have found something that consistently surprises people. The Kungsan people of the Kalahari, one of the most studied hunter-gatherer groups on Earth, spend on average between 3 and 5 hours a day on subsistence activities. Hunting, foraging, preparing food, that's it. The rest of the day is unstructured, not because life was easy, but because their methods were efficient enough that survival didn't require every waking hour. Prehistoric humans almost certainly had the same pattern, which means they had time, a lot of it. The real question is what they did with it. The oldest answer we have comes from a cave in South Africa called Blombos. Inside, archaeologists found something that stopped them cold. Pieces of ochre, a reddish-brown mineral, ground down and shaped deliberately, not used as tools, not used as weapons, engraved with crosshatch patterns that serve no functional purpose whatsoever. These pieces date to approximately 75,000 years ago. And here's what makes that finding so important. There is no survival explanation for it. You don't need a crosshatch pattern to hunt. You don't need it to build shelter or start a fire. Someone sat down, picked up a piece of mineral, and made marks on it purely because they wanted to. That's not survival behavior. That's something else entirely. And it wasn't isolated. At a site in Spain called Cueva de los Aviones, researchers found perforated shell beads dating back 115,000 years. Shells with deliberate holes worn around the body as decoration. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, there's evidence of pigment collection and use going back 160,000 years. These weren't accidents. They were choices. Deliberate, repeated, time-consuming choices made by people who had other things they could have been doing, which tells you something about what prehistoric humans valued when survival wasn't the immediate concern. But decoration is only part of it, because researchers have found something even more revealing when they look at the bones. Not human bones, animal bones, specifically the marks on them. At dozens of sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have found animal bones with series of notches carved into them in deliberate sequences. The Lebombo bone, found in a cave on the border of South Africa in Eswatini, is approximately 43,000 years old and contains 29 distinct notches in a row. The Ashango bone from the Congo, around 20,000 years old, has notches grouped in patterns that some researchers believe represent early numerical thinking. Someone was keeping track of something, time, cycles, quantities. They were counting. Not because counting helped them find food that day, but because something in the human mind needed to impose order on the world around it. That need didn't appear with civilization. It was already there, tens of thousands of years before anyone built a city. And then there's music. This one hits differently when you think about it. In 2008, archaeologists excavating a cave in southwestern Germany called Hohlefels found a flute carved from a griffin vulture bone. It had 5 finger holes, a V-shaped mouthpiece, and was constructed with a level of precision that took planning, skill, and time to develop. It dates to approximately 40,000 years ago. This wasn't the first attempt. You don't produce an instrument that refined on your first try. Which means there was a tradition behind it. People had been making music, experimenting with sound, long enough that by 40,000 years ago, they had already refined the process. Someone in a cave in Ice Age Europe sat down and played music, not to survive, not to solve a problem, because it felt like something worth doing. Now here's what makes all of this more than just a list of interesting artifacts, because you could look at all of it and say, fine, they made art and music, that's still not telling me what they did every day. And that's the right question, because the answer to that one lives not in what they left behind, but in what we still carry. Gossip. Social bonding through language, the sharing of stories. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has spent decades arguing that language itself didn't evolve primarily for exchanging information. It evolved for social grooming, the verbal equivalent of picking insects out of each other's fur. Early humans sat around fires and talked about each other, about what happened, about what might happen, about things that weren't there. They told stories, and that impulse runs so deep that it hasn't changed. Every conversation you've had today that wasn't strictly necessary, every story you told that no one needed to hear, every time you replayed something in your head just to process it, that's the same behavior, just in a different container. And here's the part that should stop you for a second, because we tend to think of boredom as a modern problem, something created by screens and overstimulation and too many choices. But boredom is not a modern invention, it's a biological signal. Neuroscientists describe it as the brain's way of signaling that its current environment isn't providing enough stimulation for its capacity. That signal exists because the brain built itself around the expectation of novelty, problem solving, and engagement. A brain that goes quiet when there's nothing to do doesn't survive. One that gets restless, that starts looking for something, that invents something to fill the gap, that one keeps going. Prehistoric humans weren't bored despite their circumstances. Their circumstances produce the same restless, searching quality that makes humans build things, decorate things, count things, play things, tell things. Every artifact we found, every bone flute, every shell bead, every ochre engraving is evidence of the same thing. A mind that couldn't leave the world alone, that needed to mark it, shape it, measure it, fill it with sound. The gap between survival and death wasn't silence for prehistoric humans. It was full. It was probably louder than we imagined. So the next time you reach for something to do, anything at all, understand what that actually is. It's not weakness. It's not distraction. It's the same restlessness that made someone 75,000 years ago pick up a piece of red mineral and drag it across stone in a pattern that meant nothing to anyone but them. The same impulse that made someone 40,000 years ago hollow out a bone and learn to make it sing. You didn't invent the need to fill time, you inherited it. And everything humans have ever built, every story, every song, every system of counting, if it's tying, every piece of art, started exactly where you are right now, with a mind that had a moment free and couldn't let it go to waste.